Thanks for coming on and joining me tonight.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, really, what you do and your area of expertise.
Yeah,
Let's have you start things off. Just introduce yourself.
cool. Let's do it. So my name is Derek Hutchins. I am a mental performance coach and the creator and host of Sailing Stone Performance Podcast. And my background is basically athletics is wrestling and football. I was wrestled since I was 6 years old. Carried that all the way through high school. Coached high schoolers actually when I was in college, and then shortly after that, I wrestled for Colorado State University for a couple years. So that's my biggest sports. And then I've been a personal trainer for 16 years. And I've also done Reiki energy healing and EFT tapping for about 8 years. And then recently decided, I want to get out of the gym. I want to really focus on working with athletes, focus on working on the mental game, because that was the biggest thing that held me back when I was competing. And I still do a lot of sports now that I really, enjoy and look to progress in, specifically wakeboarding right now. And having these tool set that I've kind of grown and built has allowed me to progress a lot further, especially in my 30s, learning how to play board sports, not the prime time, right? And so I really wish that I had these tools when I was growing up and when I was competing really heavy. And now I want to be able to give that back and help athletes go through that and not have to deal with the pressures that I dealt with.
Yeah, I think the mental side of things definitely plays as we're learning a much bigger role in the performance aspect. So you mentioned kind of your own struggles with the mental side of things in sports. How did that come about?
Yeah, I had a lot of pressure put on me, not just internally, but also externally. My brother was a state champion to, wrestler. And so it was always compared to him. He's 5 years older than me. So I was always, getting all the time, well, are you going to be that good? Are you going to, are you going to be as good as your brother? And, it really pissed me off on some levels, because it's like, well, I tried to be my own person, but I felt like I was always living in that shadow. And then all this other pressure got put on me from family and friends who they want to see you succeed, and they it wasn't until later on that I realized how much they really cared, and that's why they were pushing me. At the time, I felt like I just wasn't good enough, and so then that added into my own insecurities of not being good enough, and then that kind of spirals, right? And so I was what we call like a head case, on the wrestling team, where if I was expected to lose because this person was really, really good, I would go out and I would just like destroy that person, because there was no pressure at that point. But then on the flip side, if I was outranked somebody, and maybe I beat somebody that had beat them really bad, and I was expected to win, oftentimes I would go and I would lose, because it was like just being underneath this shell of anxiety, and the pressure. And I just didn't know, I wasn't aware of some of the different tools to be able to get out of that when I was competing.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it seems like as we kind of push our kids to become specialized earlier and earlier, we're putting a lot more pressure on them, and this pressure to compete for college scholarship at the age of 8 years old. It's like, are we really doing them any favors? Are we, because the number of kids that do go on to play college and that do go on past that are so slim. And it makes you think, is it because of the skill wise? Are the best players actually going, or is it, is a lot of it the pressure building up on these athletes that would otherwise be able to make it, but then, they either make it 1 year and then get burnt out mentally. And like, it's just, I think, such a slippery slope when you start to, put pressure on kids that are so young.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you find these athletes are, they're getting in this situation where, okay, now it's time to perform for, elite level college, professional, and they really don't want to be there. A lot of these kids were so pressured growing up that maybe it took the joy out of it for them. Like they really just did it now. Well, I got to make my way through college, or I got to make my parents happy, or even they just think that's what's expected of them, but their heart's no longer in it, right? And so then we see all of these pressures build up and build up and build up, and then people explode.
Do you think that sports, 20, 30, 40 years ago were just kind of more pure and stuff like that because of the kind of the things we're talking about with just added pressure of, and I think it was probably true to some degree, but probably for a lot less people back in the day. You certainly still had those parents who were pushing their kids, and maybe they were athletes when they were kids and they want their kid to be the same way and have the same, take the same route, so you're going to do that. I think that's could be any time period, but do you think it's more today than it ever was?
I do, because I think the money is bigger now, so the end result is so much greater in the overall scheme of your life. I think quite a few years ago, like, you can make a good living, but oftentimes after that sport, you still had to find a way to rediscover yourself and become right. And now you can make so much money doing a lot of various sports, right? Where before it was just more specialized, some of the bigger baseball, basketball, football, right? Where now you're having a lot of these smaller sports still paying a lot of money. So I think the pressure's a lot greater, and now you have a lot of parents who see the opportunity. And we also know, the younger we can get our kid to really progress and take hold, then they have a greater likelihood of being, a world champion as they get older. But I think it's a really fine line of being able to, tiptoe and inspire them to be better, because we know that we have a lot more greatness in us. And as kids, we oftentimes don't put that full effort in, right? Because we're kids. And
Yeah.
so how do we balance that? That it's tough.
Yeah, and I think it makes you think, at least it makes me think, like, is that just part of the full experience of a life, is where you don't, you don't capitalize on all opportunities, and you might, look back in a year, 10 years, and regret it, and then because of that regret, you do go kind of like a little bit harder in your own life, and you push yourself a little bit harder. I wonder if, because we're not able to fail in a way, we're not, unless it's on like a big time failure, like, without these little failures going on, like, are we able to actually have a normal experience to where we can then learn from those failures in a more natural way?
Yeah, I agree. I think that having those failures is really what builds you into a champion, and there's people that see success from a very young age, and they also use that as their, fuel of, well, I've always been the best, I'm going to continue to be the best, and that's what drives them. But I think the vast majority of people actually have a lot of hardship to overcome that then translates into something great, right? And very, very often it's not the first, second, third, it's something that, even for myself, I had to take a break when I was in college from wrestling because I was burnt out, right? I had all the pressure. I was doing it for everybody else. I didn't want to do it anymore. When I came back and wrestled at Colorado State, I did it because I loved it. I missed it. I wanted to compete. I was a completely different athlete at that point in my life than I ever was, right? And for me, something switched. The biggest thing is all the motivators were coming from me now. It wasn't from other people. I had nothing to prove to anybody. I just was out there to do it for the joy of doing it. And I made a decision, like, I'm not going to lose, right? And I was the one at practice while other people were doing, like listening, or I was jumping rope and listening, right? I was running the stairs after practice. Everybody else went home, but I continued to do these things because I knew that's what would make me better. I had that, and I was out of shape, like coming back into that compared to what I was, growing up, but I knew what it was to get back into that. And I knew it was a mentality, and I had to flip that switch. Right. And it all was the decision for me to do that. And I think that's what happens when we fail oftentimes, right? I've had a lot of different businesses too. So business and sports is very similar in that regard. I failed a lot of businesses. And when we learn from our failures, that's how we can, move on to then create better stuff, but you have to see it as a learning experience. So many athletes get hung up on the losses, right? Same with business people. If you get hung up on that loss and you're always thinking there, that's what creates the normal now. Well, now you're always thinking, well, I'm going to lose, and that creates a lot of that performance anxiety. The quicker you can transition from that loss into focusing on the next game, the next task, the next business idea, the faster you're going to become successful, because now you're going to be able to see that as a learning opportunity and take some notes like, okay, what do I need to actually learn from this? Now I can apply it on the next one. And you're going to get that much quicker and that much better up to the next speed.
Yeah. And you mentioned like kind of having that motivation within yourself. And I think it's so crazy when you compare somebody, kind of like you said in your own instance, to whenever somebody else was kind of pushing you to do something and motivating you externally, but then you have, that within you, how much you can actually, how much more energy you have and how much more you put into it. And even when it gets tough, and even when it seems like other people might quit, you still keep going when it's within yourself. And
Yeah.
I had a roommate in college who, he's really into soccer. He didn't play like Division 1. He tried out for the team. He then did the club ball, and now he plays soccer for a smaller team. But you know that's something that he really like is motivated, and it's something that is like a passion of his, and it's his dream to play soccer. And it's just so interesting because I don't think what he did and what he's still doing, I don't think that could be done. I don't think it could be at least sustainably done when somebody else is telling you that you should do it, and you have these external forces pushing you and motivating you. I just think it's so cool how our brain really can like turn into a different type of machine whenever we have that will to do it instead of it coming from somewhere else.
Yes, 100%. 100%. And that's what I work with the most with my athletes, is finding, their why for them and getting down to the root of it. And sometimes that means maybe this sport isn't for you right now or ever, but then that helps you decide, well, what is it that you want to do?
Yeah.
I think that's why we have a lot of people, a lot of athletes that go to a certain level and then they burn out. They can't do it anymore. They don't, because they're not fully in alignment with what they want to be doing, and it's not coming from them. It's all the external forces and all the, and sometimes it can start coming from them, but then all the pressures from the outside, they're unable to cope with that. So then it takes their passion away from it. Right. So that's what we work on a lot too, is just dealing and coping with all the external stressors. So that way, when you get in to the match, the game, you're 100% there and you can really enjoy being there, right? That's when you're in your zone, is when you're not thinking about all the external shit. You can turn it all off. You can just be there and be in the zone and just really enjoy it, because you trust that you've got what it takes to be there.
Yeah, and I think it's so, like I said, it's so cool when you find that motivation. And it's so cool too to like compare sports to anything else in life, because they are so, you know, so similar. And if you think about like somebody who doesn't necessarily want to go into a specific field, like say a lawyer, their family's a lawyer, and they kind of get pressured into being, a lawyer, and they go through law school, and they become a lawyer. And then it seems like that happens so many times in just everyday life with people who, aren't athletes, but they just get pressured into these situations. And it's so, I think, vital to just like teach people, hey, do what you want to do. It's not about, pleasing other people. It's not about, and I think part of that problem too is probably like you don't sometimes know what else to do.
Mhm.
You don't have like a somebody there to say, oh, if you don't want to be a wrestler, if you don't want to be a lawyer, you can do this instead. I think you get, especially as a kid, you get into those circles and it's like, oh, I didn't know I had these other options around me.
Yeah, we get into what we think are expectations and we follow what we think everybody wants us to do. We don't actually follow with what we want to do. And like you said, we don't even know what we want to do. So we kind of follow the trend or the easy road, or it's like, oh, well, everybody in my family is a lawyer. I think I'll just go do that. But then they hate it, right? And they're not really enjoying life at all. And I think people need to slow down a little bit and do a little bit of self work and realize like, okay, what is it that I want to do? And again, it comes to failing a lot of different things to realize, well, what am I even good at? What do I enjoy doing? And oftentimes that changes. And I think that's the beauty of life, is being able to flow with those changes as well and just allow it to happen naturally instead of trying to force things all the time.
Yeah, and one thing I think you mentioned it's an interesting term, performance anxiety, and you mentioned it before, but explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, it's a tricky thing. And basically performance anxiety is, it's sort of like walking out into the sport underwater, right? But it's not a water sport, right? Like, and you're having it's like you have these cement blocks on your feet, and everything, just all your motion takes a lot more energy than it normally would because your heart rate's elevated. You're anxious about it, right? And it's generally a fear of some sort, right? Like a fear of failure. A lot of times it will stem from past failures, from sports, and it can be a pressure that's put on you inside or external. I had one client of mine who, we dig in a lot of like past stuff because it's coming up now, but a lot of times it's somebody like you admired as a kid, and then you have formed an opinion about yourself based on what they, said, or their opinion of you. And sometimes it's not even true. We just make up these stories, right? And we hold on to it. So this performance anxiety is something that somebody else maybe put on you from, a lot younger. And then now you don't want to lose because, mom left and wouldn't take you home after you lost a football game because you didn't play well. Right. And so you're like, oh shit, like I can never not play well, or else like, I won't be accepted at home. So this is performance anxiety, right? And this is what we like challenge with the next time that you come on. Well, now you have that in the back of your head. So you're afraid of it, you're worried of it. And when it really starts to take hold is when that's all you think about, instead of really focusing on the joy and what your job is and trusting that you're going to put your, everything in it. Because that's what happens, is really, that's what practice is, right? You put a million reps in, so that way when you get to the game, you don't have to think. Your body knows what to do already, right? But with performance anxiety, all you're doing is thinking, and it's all bad shit. Right? It's not the positive stuff about how you're going to do really well. It's all the bad trauma stuff. So that's really what performance anxiety is, and how it hinders you as an athlete.
Gotcha. And you mentioned just talking through it and trying to figure out kind of the root of that
Mhm.
issue, but what is something, if I come to you and say, we talk about it, what is something that we would do or you would tell me to do to really try to get through that?
Yeah. So my biggest tool is EFT tapping. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
It sounds familiar, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So essentially what it is you actually tap on pressure points. They call them energy meridians within the body. So anytime we have trauma from a past experience, it gets locked kind of in our body. And if you think of our bodies as a big circuit board, where it just flows, with energy currents. Well, when we have trauma, it actually will disrupt that current. And so the synapses aren't connecting properly. So what EFT does is kind of like unplugging a bad circuit and plugging it back into the proper connection. So then your body's circuitry is actually running, and it releases that trauma and that energy block that you had from the trauma. And then so that's what I use is EFT. When what we would do is we would dig into figuring out like, okay, well, what is this trauma that you're holding on to? Who caused that for you? What was the opinion that you made? And then what we do is we what we call flip the script. So we'll use EFT, but then what we do is we actually shift your mindset around that belief system, right? Because all it is it's a belief that we formed about ourselves, right? And so what we do is we shift that belief. Then EFT helps actually facilitate that and release that trauma.
Gotcha. And how long does that take? Is that a one-time thing? Is that multiple times? Is it throughout a career?
Yeah, it's different for everybody, right? Generally, it can happen all in one session. We can get rid of, a bunch of stuff. Oftentimes what ends up happening is then you create this awareness around it. and you start becoming more aware of like, oh, you know what, actually in fourth grade this happened, and no, this happened. So you become more aware of all these things that are holding you back and these limitations. So then we can go into another session like, sweet, let's just dig all that stuff, let's just get rid of it, right? So it's also now being scientifically studied a lot more. I know my mentor, so she's been featured on like Heal documentary on Netflix, and she did a lot of work with PTSD and veterans. So that's a big part of what it's useful for, is just, you know, eliminating PTSD. But now that's being studied a lot more, there's a lot more science behind it, and they're actually finding out that if you use this during traumatic events, it can actually stop you or prevent you from actually having PTSD. So using EFT while you're actually going through trauma is actually very beneficial as well. So to, I guess, a long-winded answer your question is like, you know, we can let go of a lot of stuff first session, but then if other things start coming up, you know, then we'll dig in a little bit more. You know, there's other things where some people are psychologically reversed in a way where they know that it's something that will hold them back, and in theory they want to let that go, but they really don't, like subconsciously, because for them it's a crutch, right? Or then sometimes it's more than that, right? Sometimes it's the fear of success. And well, if I actually let go of these things that are holding me back, then now I don't have an excuse and I have to become the successful person.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting concept too, is the fear of success. And it's so, you know, like you kind of said, it's this like almost backwards thought of like, okay, if I become successful, what are the negatives? Whereas most people think, you know, oh, if I become successful, else can I, you know, do? Can I have more money? Can I have more whatever else that comes with success? Like there's so many good things that do come with it. But then it's like this fear. It's like, oh, well, will I be, you know, looked at harder by people? Like, you know, what kind of dig into though, what really is fear of success?
Yeah. So a lot of people think like, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, why would I ever have that? Like, it doesn't make sense. Well, then think about it from this angle. You know, now that you're the successful person, you know, see it with a lot of like ball players too, right? They become successful. Now all their friends want to leech on, right? All their family wants to leech on. Well, hey, can you help me with money with this? Hey, can I have money with this? Right? So now you're all of a sudden this target. You have this target on your back and everybody's out asking for shit, right? So that's one reason why people, you know, the other part is we've identified ourselves in so much of the as the loser or the pain, or like, right, even though we know we have the ability to win and all of these things, we don't know what it actually feels like, and it's foreign to us. And so that's creates a fear, because I know what's comfortable. I've lost a lot of times before, so I'm just going to stay here because I know it, even though it's miserable and I hate it, it's comfortable, right? So I'm going to stay there. How many times have you heard, well, like, oh, that person's an asshole because they're successful, right? And we get all these judgments on us from other people, usually who aren't doing anything, right? They're the ones that didn't ever follow their dreams, so they hate on anybody who's following theirs. Well, they're successful, they're an asshole. And hey, you know, like, you have to change who you are to be that successful person. And that's where people have that fear of the success, because they don't know who they are. And so, like, right, they don't know who they are with success. They want to stay comfortable with who they are right now.
Yeah, I think comfort zones are one of those like really crazy things about us. Like you said, even if it's something that we don't like, if it's miserable, we will still
Mhm.
prefer that situation to the one we don't know yet. And it's funny you say that, because today I caught myself in that exact situation, and it's nothing even like serious in life, but it just made me think. I was ordering something off a menu at a restaurant, and I order it, and then I like make it basically something else on the menu, like the same exact thing. So if I just ordered that thing at the beginning, I wouldn't have to do the work to like change it into this thing. But I'm like, but I know how to do this one. I know how to like change it. I don't know like if I order this other thing, how it'll come. I don't know if it'll be the different whatever. Like it would be so much easier for me just to order this other menu item, but I just go with the one I'm already familiar with, even though it takes like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes just to like change things around when I get it.
Yeah, because we felt this expectation too, right? That when we don't get what we want, it's a bad thing,
Right.
right? Well,
Yeah.
if I order the easy one and it comes out not what I was expecting, I'm going to be disappointed,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's
Instead
weird.
of instead of being able to just be excited, okay, well, like I hope this is it, but either way, I'm going to enjoy it. And then for next time, it's like, all right, fuck, I'm never going to do that again because it was awful. I'm going to stick to what I know, but at least I gave it a try, right? And instead, we judge ourselves, like, well, why did you do it that way? Like all these internal voices. And we're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Do it. Explore that, right? I
Right.
think we are so hard on ourselves all the time that it's hard to look and see some of our shortcomings and not judge them, right? That's the biggest thing that I found in myself doing the work is at first I just looked at everything like, oh my God, I have so many problems, right? I have so many issues. And then I was really judging myself on it. So then it made me not want to go and actually get better because then I had to look at all the shit I didn't like about myself, right? Where now after doing this for years and years, I kind of enjoy. Now I'm like, oh shit, that was there, huh? Cool. And at not judging myself that I have, whatever's coming up, and just like, all right, cool. Now that I have the awareness, I can actually change my mind on it.
Yeah, and it's interesting we talk I think we all talk about like judging ourselves a lot and like being critical, and it's weird because that could be good at some level. That could be good to be like, okay, maybe I can do this better. But then we kind of take it to extremes, and it just makes me question like, where does that come from? Why do we do that? Is that judgment coming from, is it coming from something new within our society? Do you think do you think this over judgment of ourselves is something that we're doing more now?
Yeah, I think with social media, right? And all of the ad campaigns and everything that we see, everything for decades has just been to get us to feel shitty about ourselves. So we buy product, right? It's pretty simple. Like you don't have this, you're worthless, you need this to fix it.
Right.
So then we get wired that way. So now it's just human nature to be hard on ourselves. um and we don't have this forgiveness. um does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's such, like I said, it's such a tool that, and then if you go the wrong way with it, like the other extreme, it's like you're never kind of taking self inventory. You're never caring about yourself and making any progress in what you want to do. You're not saying, oh, maybe I can do better in this. You just it's so strange to me how there's all like a huge spectrum to everything. Mental health, physical health, and for too far to one side or the other, it seems like it's very problematic. And I say it with physical health all the time, but with mental health too, it's almost just crazy to me that there's anybody out there that's just functional whatsoever because of this wide range of potential we have as humans.
Yeah, well, so if you want to look, like if we look at the physical part, the mental's the same way, right? Where you can see your shortcomings, you want to get better, right? That's great. You need to have that awareness and that drive to better yourself. But where it becomes hindering is when you take it so far it's no longer healthy,
Right.
right? And then the judgments are coming, and the judgments aren't to learn more about yourself to then become better. The judgments are like this self-loathing, and they keep you in this cycle of, well, I'm not enough, right? That's where it becomes not healthy. It's too far, right? So you need to have a good balance of like, sweet, I need to be self-aware. I need to understand where I want to go, and I can then push myself and I can overcome the things that are holding me back. But then if we go too far, right, then we're judging ourselves. We're like, in the spiral.
Yeah.
So
And do you see athletes? Do you see when they come to you? Do you see like a very common problem they come to you with, or is it just kind of all over the board?
yeah, it can be all over the board. I think a really common one is just the I'm not enough, right? Like they don't feel worthy enough, they don't feel good enough. And and I think that it becomes, from the young age, they're always trying to be better and compete. Like even if they're, world champions, there's still some level of, well, I'm not enough. And it's a lot of times it might not always show up in athletics, but it could show up in other areas of their life too.
Yeah. It sounds almost like imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
where it's like, okay, other people see you and they're like, okay, they have this expertise or this skill. Like I can see that, we can all see that, but the person is struggling because I think they feel like they have, they might see themselves in a at a time in life when they maybe didn't have that same skill or whatever it is. But yeah, it's just crazy how, you could probably ask anybody at some point in their life to where they almost feel like they don't belong in their job, like they don't, deserve a job, or they don't deserve to be the starter on the team or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So we also call it like the glass ceiling, right? So reaching your glass ceiling essentially is allowing the amount of joy and happiness that you're willing to accept for yourself, right? And some people have it really high, some people it's not that high at all, right? But what happens is then you see when you reach that peak, you start to self sabotage, right? And so
Gotcha.
you see this a lot of times, like for instance, people that win the lottery. This is too much. I don't deserve this. And then they don't, they throw it away, right? They create a scenario where now they're bankrupt, right? And you see with athletes a lot too. They reach a certain point, well, then they just start, self-sabotaging their careers. And I think also we're kind of taught in a lot of other like mental sports things that I've read and watched, and a lot of it is they teach you more about like, well, you have to be 110% devoted into your sport and nothing else. I don't believe that. I believe that if you're 100% dedicated to your sport, you can also be 100% dedicated to yourself, dedicated to your family, dedicated, right? Because you have the ability to do it. Now you have to figure out, how do you balance all of that, right? That's the challenging part. That's why it's easy for people to focus just on one thing and say, fuck everything else. But I think that's taking the easier road out, because mentally, if your home life is really stable, you're going to play better, right?
Yep.
If your home life is more stable, everything else is going to be more stable, right? And we limit ourselves by saying, well, if I'm going to be the best, I can only do this.
Right.
You put that parameter on yourself, right? Or a coach or somebody, right? It's like, what if it doesn't have to be like that? What if you start telling yourself a different story? And now when you see all the angles on the field of how you get better, now you also see those angles of how you can be a better dad, a better husband, a better, all of these things. And now you can use that same techniques and all the same drive that you did to get the best in your sport. And now you can be better at other things, right? Now it's balance. You can't do them all simultaneously.
Yeah, I think it's just so challenging to even think about because we are kind of culturally we are, told to be go 110%. We're told to, always be busy. We're told all these things about like production, and if you're not being productive, then you're being lazy and all these different things. Like we have all these cultural truths that we buy into, and it's hard to kind of think around those a lot of times because it's like, you do want to be productive, you do want to, go, you do want to be all into what you're doing to a certain degree, but you also, like you were saying, you have to have some type of balance. You have to, I guess, value the aspect of being more than just the sport or more than just the job. And
It's just like weightlifting or performing in your sport, right? You give it 110% on that day. Well, you also need to equally recover, right?
yeah.
So that's the juxtaposition. That's the same kind of concept where it's like, okay, yes, you need to go 110%, but then now tomorrow you need to go 110% on rest,
Yeah,
right? And
that's good.
so that balance is going to help you have a lot more longevity in your career. Your body's going to handle it a lot better, right? And so you have to take 110% into all of those aspects of sleep and eating, and all of those things have to be there in order for you to perform your best all the time for a very long time.
Gotcha. And moving to kind of a more personal side of things, like how do you try to keep yourself on track mentally?
Yeah. Yeah, so I have really worked hard at kind of creating a good morning routine, which is, going through some tapping and really like, doing some Reiki and setting my intention for the day. just allows me to clear any of my energy that needs to kind of just shift and clear, and allows me to be just excited and ready to tackle the day, and then, go through that. Um, I need a lot of personal time, reflect, downtime, just to relax, right? So I actually structure that into my schedule during the day, during the week, to where I have those times that I can do that work. Even if it's to do no work, to go out. I live here in Washington, and so a lot of times for me now, it's like, okay, I need to go out in nature. I need to get out and I need to enjoy and just get away from the city, and just, get out for a little bit. And having those allows me then, when I come back to work, when it's work time, I can be in it. I'm here. I don't have to be distracted because I'm excited about it now, right? And I'm building a life that I really enjoy. So when I'm doing the work, it's fulfillment for me. It's enjoyable, right? And then also at the end of the day, having a nice wind down routine is kind of similar, where like, all right, I'll just kind of, do some Reiki and tapping and just fluff off like all the stuff from the day, and really allow myself to just settle in and just let go of any stress, any worry, have a good night's sleep, and then, jump up, set my day, everything. So that's really helped me in my personal life. And it's something that, as you go on and as you get better, you just start honing in a little bit. Well, what's working for me? All right, what's not working? And you just get used to that. It's kind of a daily activity of self-awareness, and I get to set the rules. I can change it whenever I want, like that's the cool thing about that. All right, sweet, this isn't working, let's change it. What do I think it's going to be, right? And now it's fun for me. It's enjoyable to try and figure out how to be better at that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something I'm actually working on as well, is just trying to find a, good solid routine, but not one that I feel like I have to, sometimes I feel like I'll build a routine, and then if I can't stick with it, it's like I'm failing, but maybe just I didn't, take into consideration this, or, I'm
Mhm.
not failing. It's the routine, it's the routine just not set up right. So, I think I've been getting better though at understanding more of like, I'm not perfect. I can't build a perfect system. So, it's okay if I, instead of doing this, for this amount of time, I'm going to do this other thing, and then switch it around and do this maybe in the evening instead. And yeah, I think a routine has a big impact on mental state, because it's just like this certainty. We don't have to think about every aspect whenever we have, a good chunk of things that are already kind of pre-programmed.
Yeah, absolutely. I always leave a little bit of room to like call an audible, right? Just something where I'm like, I'm not really feeling this right now.
Right.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Certain things we have to push through, right? The different obligations and whatnot. But most of the time for me, I'm able to say, like, I don't want to create this right now. I'm going to come back to it. What do I need to do right now? What is, why am I not having this push? And just trying to better understand. I think a lot of times we set ourselves up for failure, right? We set these expectations that are unrealistic, right? That nobody actually would be able to, adhere to this strict schedule, but yet we're telling ourselves, oh, we can do it. And then when we don't do it, it kind of reiterates the way that we feel inside, right? Which is like, well, I'm not enough. See, I can't even stick to my schedule. Instead of, it's fine to have that rigorous schedule and these, big dreams, but you can't put so much pressure that if it doesn't happen, then you're worthless, right? It has to be cool. Why isn't this working? How can I make this better? And then flowing with it and letting it develop into this personal routine that works really, really well for you. I think we also take, all the high productive stuff from all the top performers, and we think we have to do it that same way. And when it doesn't work for us, well, I'm just not a successful person. I just can't do it. It's just not who I am, right? And then we make all these assumptions. No, you just got to figure out what works for you, and that takes time and actually doing it and tweaking it as you go.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good advice, is to just kind of like find your own thing. You can definitely pull from people who have had success, but if they do it a certain way, make yours a little bit different if that's what works for you. And then, when 20, 30, 40 years, you're going to be the one that other people look to and
Yeah.
say, kind of the same thing you were doing. And then the cycle, hopefully
Yep.
continues to where it's just like, okay, they did it like this. I'll pull from them and do it a little bit differently. I think that's a really kind of good way to look at it is to take their, general advice, but you don't have to become a clone of them.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because you become better by looking at all the better people around you, right? Take the top performers and study them. What are they doing? But then apply it in the way that best works for you, right? It's not a cookie cutter. It's not, well, I have to do it to a T what worked for them. We're all individuals, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Awesome, man. Well, it's great, really good getting to talk to you, getting to meet you, and talking about this mental side of things. We often talk so much about the physical, and that's definitely important. But to get to cover a little mental side, that's really exciting as well. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for having me, bro. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good to meet you. And if you want to just share where people can find you and your podcast, that'd be cool.
Yeah, so you guys can check out at Derek Hutchins. That is my Instagram handle right now. I'm just doing IG lives IGTV. That's where I'm releasing all my podcast stuff right now. So I've only got 6 episodes out. I'm releasing one every Wednesday. So when I have 10 out, I'm gonna start an Apple Podcast and Spotify and be able to release it on there. Trying to just get a little bit, kind of banked up, so that way if
Yeah.
things get off, I could, am not rushing or missing a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also Sailing Stone Performance on YouTube. They're live right now as well.
Awesome. Well, good luck with everything, with the podcast and with everything
Thank you.
else. It seems like, that's a really good thing people can benefit from, the mental side of things. So once again, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to putting this one out there.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. Thank you so much. Look forward to
Yeah.
connecting more in the future.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
All right, bud. You too.
See ya.
Bye.